I have faced many challenges with procrastination, but over time I learned to recognize this habit and overcome it. And you? Have you ever found yourself postponing something important with that feeling of guilt and frustration for not being able to start? Don't worry, this is more common than you might think. Procrastinating is an internal battle we all face. But what if I told you that there are simple and even unexpected ways to change this story? In this video, I'll show you why we procrastinate and, more importantly, how to overcome it with practical and effective strategies. Stay with me until the end and discover how to transform your relationship with your tasks. First, it is essential to understand what procrastination is. The word comes from Latin procrastinated. Pro means ahead, and crastinus refers to tomorrow. In other words, procrastinating is postponing a task that we need to accomplish until tomorrow or later. It seems that this practice has been with humanity for a long time. In fact, speaking in Latin, I found an interesting phrase from the Roman philosopher Seneca. While we waste our time hesitating and delaying, life dissipates. This shows that even thousands of years ago, people already reflected on the effects of postponing what needs to be done. The Greeks also addressed this topic. Hesiod, an ancient poet, wrote, "Do not postpone until tomorrow, nor the day after tomorrow. Barns are not filled by those who delay and dedicate their time to fruitlessness." A beautiful reminder that procrastination can keep us away from concrete results. Let's understand together how to leave this habit behind. Procrastination is an old problem. If procrastination is such an old problem, is there an effective way to overcome it? First of all, we need to better understand what it means to procrastinate. After all, not every break or moment of rest can be considered procrastination. For example, resting is not procrastinating. Resting is a basic need of the human body. Not only do we not need to work all the time, we can't. Leisure is essential, including to stimulate our creativity. Interestingly, the words leisure and business have opposite meanings. While leisure is related to free time and not working, business, by definition, is the denial of this time. This is a small curiosity, but it makes us reflect. Today, we often view leisure in a negative light, but for much of human history, having free time was a privilege reserved for the nobility. An idle life was a symbol of status and power. This concept evolved and gave rise to the idea of creative leisure, developed by Italian sociologist Domenico De Masi. According to him, free time dedicated to culture, whether consuming or producing content, is essential to awaken creativity. So while I prepare this video and you watch it, like it, and share it, none of these moments are a waste of time. Within the logic of creative leisure, entertainment stops being just a distraction and becomes an integral part of increasing our productivity. Of course, this all works within a balance. The secret is not to let leisure take up 100% of our time. Procrastination versus laziness. The crucial difference. You can't spend the whole day on the couch watching television and say you're practicing creative leisure. Here comes a fundamental distinction. Being a procrastinator is different from being lazy. The lazy person simply doesn't care. She knows she has important tasks to accomplish, but she doesn't care. Your priority is to relax without worrying about your responsibilities. Laziness is the lack of interest in carrying out tasks. Procrastinating is different. It is the difficulty of accomplishing something, even knowing its importance. A procrastinator is fully aware that they need to complete a certain task and feel bad for not being able to do it. Something stops him from acting, even if he wants to. Canadian psychologist Timothy Cycle, one of the greatest authorities on the subject, defines procrastination as knowing what needs to be done, but not being able to do it. In other words, it is the gap between intention and action. Why, after all, do we procrastinate? There are several possible reasons. One of them is the desire to avoid negative sensations. This can include the fear of not being able to perform a task correctly, which leads to preferring not to start at all. or the stress of facing bigger problems, like avoiding looking at your bills or credit card bills so as not to deal with your own financial situation. A similar example is postponing a doctor's appointment for fear of discovering a health problem, something that, rationally, only makes the situation worse. Another common reason is a lack of interest in tasks that seem tedious or distant, such as filling out a tax return. Furthermore, procrastination can also be driven by our preference for immediate rewards. With the speed of social networks, we have become accustomed to receiving instant stimuli. Short videos, quick messages, instant responses. This addicts the brain, which starts to avoid activities that require more time and effort to bring results. This behavior, encouraged by the culture of speed and immediate gratification, has reached a growing number of people. A study by Fundação Estudar, in partnership with the research company MindMiners, revealed that 52% of people consider procrastination to be their biggest enemy when it comes to productivity. But the research makes it clear how procrastination is one of today's main challenges. For some people, the challenge of procrastination is even more pronounced. A clear example is those who live with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, a condition that is closely linked to procrastination. The difficulty in maintaining focus and organizing tasks causes these people to postpone both important activities and those that could be done immediately. This behavior not only affects productivity, but can also have negative consequences for health. The impacts of procrastination on health. Leaving a task until the last minute can significantly increase your stress level. This elevates hormones like cortisol and adrenaline in the body. When procrastination becomes a constant habit, the impacts begin to be reflected in health more broadly. Several problems can arise as a result, including anxiety, depression, gastrointestinal diseases, cardiovascular problems, hypertension, increased risk of stroke, heart attacks, and even panic episodes. Therefore, it is essential to adopt more balanced and healthy routines, which help to carry out tasks without procrastinating excessively. But how can we reduce procrastination? According to science, the first step is to avoid exaggerated self-criticism. It is normal to experience difficulty starting certain activities. Remember, you're not the first person to procrastinate, and you certainly won't be the last. Everything is fine. Practical strategies for overcoming procrastination. Allow yourself emotional space so you don't get overly frustrated with yourself. This approach has a scientific basis. Studies show that there is a link between low levels of self-compassion and the tendency to procrastinate. Furthermore, it becomes easier to carry out tasks when we have a good reason to do them. Thinking about a clear motivation can help you take the first step. For example, completing your degree work can benefit other colleagues, or organizing your finances can allow you to save more money for that much-desired trip. Another great motivator, according to science, is the perception of proximity to the completion of a task. This is where the to-do list tip comes in. Breaking a big task into smaller steps makes the work less intimidating and increases the feeling of progress, as each completed step becomes a small victory. After creating your list, the next step is to get started. It may seem obvious, but getting started really makes all the difference. Often, the hardest thing is taking the first step. For example, when I see a book with many pages, I may feel a certain fear. But when reading the first page, it feels like a button activates in my brain and everything flows more naturally. Therefore, when facing a challenging task, avoid focusing anxiously on the end result. Focus on the beginning, and the rest of the process will become easier. Start at the beginning. It is precisely to facilitate this moment that finding motivation and creating a to-do list are so important. The next tip is to establish clear deadlines, both for the final objective and for each stage of the process. Setting an appropriate time for each action helps make tasks more manageable. Research indicates that setting aside specific distraction-free periods is essential to increasing efficiency. For example, if I need to deliver a project next Friday, the general deadline will be by the end of the week. To organize it, I can allocate 2 hours to research information and outline the scope, another afternoon with the team for planning, and reserve 8 hours for execution and a final afternoon for monitoring. This way, I can plan how much time to dedicate to each step, always remembering that I am not a machine. Rest is also essential. Managing time is essential to avoid procrastination, and one of the best-known techniques for this is the Pomodoro method. Created in 1988 by the Italian Francesco Cirillo, this technique is widely used to increase productivity, whether at work, as in this case, or in other activities, such as studying for a test. The method is simple but effective. You time yourself exactly 25 minutes and dedicate yourself completely to the chosen activity. For example, if you need to study for an English test, you spend those 25 minutes focusing solely on that without interruptions. The advantage is that 25 minutes doesn't seem so long, which makes it easier to stay focused. After this period, you are entitled to 5 minutes of rest to do whatever you want. Check your cell phone, drink water, or listen to music. But be careful. The break is timed, just 5 minutes. After that, you start a new cycle of 25 minutes focused and another 5 minutes of break. Repeat this process 4 times. When you complete the 4 rounds, take a longer break of about 30 minutes before starting a new cycle. If you're wondering why this technique is called Pomodoro, the answer is curious. The inventor of the method used a tomato-shaped timer, hence the name, which means tomato in Italian. Another important tip is to focus on one task at a time. Often, our brain tries to do several things at the same time, like opening several tabs in the browser. You start researching one topic, move on to another, and soon you're on something completely different. To avoid this, stay focused on the task you defined as a priority within the stipulated deadline, without giving in to distractions. If you want, you can call it mindfulness, but I prefer to call it focus. And speaking of distractions, they are a big challenge, especially nowadays. What distracts our attention the most? Yes, the cell phone. Therefore, putting it aside during periods of concentration is essential to make the method work. The next tip is to eliminate distractions. If you won't need your cell phone for the task at hand, store it in a drawer. As I mentioned before, you can use it during breaks. Another option is to create a reward. Decide that when you finish the activity, you will spend an hour on your cell phone, playing or watching something. And that brings us to an important tip. Establish rewards. The expectation of earning a reward activates the brain reward circuit, releasing dopamine, which increases motivation. This is great for giving us that little push we need to complete a task we've been procrastinating. For example, I'm currently very involved in reading, and as soon as I finish this video, I intend to take the opportunity to dive into the book I recently purchased. If you're curious about which book I'm reading, leave a comment here. I'd love to share. And we can't forget about rest. Rest is also a valuable and fundamental reward. And yes, postponing a task is not always synonymous with procrastination. The positive side is that there are strategies to deal with this. In addition to all the tips I mentioned, there is a very interesting technique that uses procrastination itself in favor of the procrastinator: structured procrastination. This technique was created by the American philosopher John Perry. In an almost playful way, John Perry, the creator of this technique, was even awarded the Ig Nobel Prize, which is a kind of anti-Nobel Prize. It is given to ideas that, although they seem random or even funny, end up making sense. The philosopher was inspired by a phrase by American humorist Robert Benchley, who said, "Anyone can do any amount of work when they shouldn't be doing it at that moment." In other words, we are capable of accomplishing many things when, in fact, we should be focused on more important tasks. Based on this, Perry proposed a strategy to trick the brain and combat procrastination. He suggests that if you need to accomplish a task, simply plan an activity that is even more important and challenging than the previous one. The idea is that the brain, upon perceiving the new task as more demanding, will seek to procrastinate on it, giving it the false impression that it is more important and urgent. By doing this, you end up doing what really needed to be done, as the new activity, no matter how difficult it may seem, becomes more attractive than the previous one. For example, in my case, I was putting off starting a new personal project because that task was at the top of my to-do list. So, to trick my brain, I placed an even more laborious task on top of that: writing a book of poetry. My brain immediately thought, writing a book of poetry is going to be a lot of work. It's better to postpone that until later and focus on the project, which is simpler. And so, without meaning to, I ended up doing what needed to be done. Of course, this technique may not work for everyone, but it doesn't hurt to try. In my case, it has been effective. This is just one of several strategies I've used to overcome procrastination and achieve my goals. I'm glad you made it this far, and I hope the tips help you too. If you like this video, leave a like to help the channel grow. Subscribe and activate the bell to receive more content like this. And don't forget to share to support our work. What makes you procrastinate more? Very difficult or very tedious tasks? Comment below, I want to know your opinion. I see you in the next video.